Hello, you're listening to Rot-Weiß-Rot REPORT, the podcast for those who live and work in Austria. Every week, we bring you the key events and news, concise and clear, so you stay on top of the changes that affect your work, your documents, and your everyday life. It was a packed week. The government unveiled its budget plan for the next 2 years, and it can fairly be described as an austerity agenda. Fuel prices are back in the headlines. Authorities have extended the so-called price break, though the discount has shrunk considerably. Meanwhile, new rules for electric scooters have come into force on Austrian roads. We'll tell you what can now earn you a fine and why pavements have become a no-go zone. We'll also explain why human rights groups have filed a complaint against Austria with the European Commission, and where the better job prospects lie, in the city or in the countryside. All that and more in just a moment. And we'll start with the big one: money.
On April 27th, after weeks of intense negotiations, the government finally presented its budget plan for 2027 and 2028, the so-called two-year budget, Doppelbudget. Why plan for 2 years at once? The core reason is debt. The state is spending 5 billion euros more than it collects in taxes and is forced to borrow the difference. European Union rules prohibit a deficit exceeding 3% of a country's economic output, and Austria currently sits above that threshold. A 2-year budget plan is therefore required to demonstrate precisely how and where Austria intends to cut costs. On one hand, state spending will fall, meaning certain benefits and payments may be reduced. On the other, Austrians now have financial certainty for 2 years ahead. Taxes and payment conditions will not change without warning next year, allowing households to plan their finances with confidence. The government's ambition is clear: plug a gap of more than 5 billion euros. How? First, the banking levy, Bankenabgabe, which had been promised for abolition, will remain in place for a further 3 years. Large corporations will also face a higher corporate income tax, Körperschaftsteuer. Second, pension increases will trail price rises over the next 2 years, meaning retirees will be able to buy less with their pensions than they can today. But the state will save more than 500 million euros in the process. Third, the child tax credit, Familienbonus Plus, will be restructured. The amount returned to families will now depend on the age of the children and whether the parents are in employment. Fourth, the rules governing unemployment insurance contributions, Arbeitslosenversicherung, will be revised. The state expects to raise an additional 349 million euros from this measure, which typically signals either reduced payouts or tighter eligibility conditions. There are, however, positive changes in the new budget. Ancillary labor costs, Lohnnebenkosten, the additional contributions employers pay on top of gross wages, covering health insurance, pension contributions, unemployment insurance, and more, will be cut by 1 percentage point. By making labor cheaper for businesses, the government hopes to stimulate job creation. Despite the overarching austerity drive, funding has also been earmarked for a second compulsory year of kindergarten, which should ease the financial burden on families. What does this mean in practice? Put simply, the cost of living will rise slightly, but finding work may become easier. If you are on a low wage or receiving social benefits, the impact of the cuts will be modest. Tax credit payments may decrease somewhat, but as employers find it cheaper to hire staff officially, the incentive to take on workers through formal contracts grows, improving job seekers' chances. In summary, the heaviest burden of the new budget falls on the wealthy and on big business. Vice-Chancellor Andreas Babler confirmed as much, stating that ordinary workers would be least affected and that those with millions would pay more. It is worth noting, however, that the final budget figures and full details will not be known until June 10th. when the government delivers its complete presentation.
The second major story of the week centers on the so-called fuel price break, Spritpreisbremse. We have covered this measure in previous episodes. A brief reminder, following the sharp rise in oil prices triggered by the conflict in the Middle East, the Austrian government introduced special relief. The scheme involved cutting the price of a liter of petrol and diesel by 10 euro cents, 5 cents through a tax reduction, and 5 cents through an agreement with fuel companies to absorb the remainder from their profit margins. That deal was due to expire on the 30th of April. Throughout April, ministers debated whether to extend it. The situation grew particularly tense following an audit of OMV, one of the country's largest oil companies. It emerged that while Austrians were overpaying at the pump, the company was reporting enormous profits, a revelation that infuriated many politicians, who began demanding even greater concessions from the oil industry. On Thursday, April 30th, negotiations reached an impasse. Major newspapers led with headlines about collapse and failure, as the government and fuel companies appeared unable to agree. It seemed that prices would jump sharply from May 1st, but late that evening, the government announced a compromise. The discount has been extended, albeit on less favorable terms. Previously, drivers saved 10 euro cents on every liter of petrol or diesel. Under the new arrangement, the discount is only partially maintained. For the first 2 weeks of May, savings of around 7 cents per liter apply. 2 cents through a reduction in mineral oil tax, Mineralölsteuer, and 5 cents through a cap on fuel companies' profit margins. From 16th May, however, fuel retailers may have their share of the discount, reducing the overall saving to around 4.5 euro cents per liter. Worst of all, the scheme may be wound up entirely by the end of May, at which point prices would rise by the full amount. Current prices vary across Austria. For Euro Super petrol, the cheapest options are in Lower Austria and Upper Austria. For diesel, the best value is currently in Tyrol. Hopes of a further fall in pump prices in the near term appear unlikely. Brent crude oil is trading above $100 a barrel, and Middle East tensions continue to disrupt supply chains. Austrian fuel companies, for their part, are firmly opposed to state intervention in pricing. That said, they remain under scrutiny to prevent any artificial inflation of prices.
And we close our review of the week's main stories with 2 major political scandals. The newspaper Der Standard and the ORF Public Broadcasters Investigative Program, Report, conducted a joint investigation that sent shockwaves through the political establishment. Their findings? Individuals officially under surveillance by Austria's Domestic Intelligence Service are working inside the Austrian parliament, the building where the country's most important laws are made. The agency in question is the Verfassungsschutz, the Office for the Protection of the Constitution, which monitors these individuals on suspicion of extremism. It emerged that they are members or supporters of the Identitäre Bewegung, a far-right radical movement the state considers a threat to democracy. Particularly striking is how they gained access. They are employed as official parliamentary assistants to members of the FPO, Freiheitliche Partei Österreichs, the Freedom Party of Austria. Following the investigation's publication, journalists and opposition politicians are demanding answers. How did individuals deemed a security risk gain unrestricted access to rooms where classified state matters are discussed? Parliament has begun debating an urgent introduction of comprehensive security vetting for all staff. The FPO has denied all wrongdoing, with its members dismissing the investigation as a politically motivated campaign timed ahead of elections. The second political scandal erupted after prominent investigative journalist Yilmaz Gulum, presenter of the same Report program, revealed live on-air figures that left many viewers outraged. It emerged that Austria's political parties receive vast sums of public money from the state budget. In 2025, a combined total of €266 million was allocated to all parties, drawn from both the federal budget and the budgets of individual federal states, Länder. When measured per capita, Austria ranks as an absolute world leader in political party funding. No other democracy spends as much on its politicians relative to its population. This issue has landed with particular force right now, as the government simultaneously calls for belt-tightening on pensions and social benefits. The public is now asking, why are millions being saved at the expense of ordinary citizens, while political parties continue to receive record sums for advertising and office expenses? That debate is unlikely to fade anytime soon, with opposition groups and civic activists calling for an immediate reduction in party funding. That concludes our main stories of the week. Next, we turn to the economy.
The Austrian Institute of Economic Research, Wirtschaftsforschungsinstitut, WIFO, has published its report for the first quarter of 2026. Austria's economy grew by 0.2% compared with the final quarter of last year. Year-on-year, the figure stands at 0.6%. This is a significant milestone. In 2023 and 2024, Austria was in recession, a period of sustained contraction in the production of goods and services. That contraction has now halted. Economists forecast overall growth of 0.5% for the full year 2026, with the figure potentially reaching 1% in 2027. For those living and working in Austria, this means the risk of mass business closures has diminished, though a rapid rise in incomes should not be expected anytime soon. The labor market remains under strain. Despite the economic recovery, unemployment stands at 7.5%, lower than the 8.4% recorded in December 2025, but still above previous years. Analysts at Bank Austria say the number of available positions will not begin to grow in a meaningful way until next year. At present, a significant divide exists across different sectors. Vacancies in retail are declining, while healthcare, social care, IT, and technical manufacturing face acute staff shortages. For those seeking stable, long-term employment, specialists recommend focusing on these fields. They also offer better prospects for obtaining or renewing a work visa or residence permit, as the state actively seeks qualified professionals in these areas. The second major economic story concerns inflation, which affects every household directly. According to Statistik Austria, Austria's annual inflation rate in April 2026 stood at 3.3%, up from March and well above the Eurozone average of 2.1%. The gap is largely explained by a rise in rents in many apartment buildings that took effect on April 1st, alongside increases in mobile phone and internet tariffs. Energy costs remain elevated due to the Middle East conflict, and the partial withdrawal of the fuel price brake from May 1st is expected to put further upward pressure on prices in the months ahead. As a result, economists at WIFO and the Institute for Advanced Studies, IHS, have revised their annual forecasts. Where 2% inflation had been anticipated, the consensus is now shifting toward 3% for the full year 2026. For residents, this, above all, means a continued erosion of purchasing power, as wages in most sectors are failing to keep pace with prices. Expensive fuel raises the cost of transporting all goods, which automatically pushes supermarket price tags higher. Over the past 2 years, food prices in Austria have already risen by 15 to 20% depending on the product category, a burden felt most acutely by those on lower incomes who spend a greater share of their money on essentials. To protect household budgets, experts recommend shopping more frequently at discount retailers and actively using promotional vouchers and loyalty discounts at major chains, as these remain among the few effective ways of reducing monthly living costs. That covers the economic news from last week. Next, information of particular relevance to migrants.
The first and most pressing topic for many is family reunification, Familiennachzug, the legal process by which a person already granted protection in Austria may bring a spouse, partner, or minor children to join them legally. Austria has in effect blocked this pathway for people holding refugee status or subsidiary protection, subsidiärer Schutz, a special status granted to those who did not qualify for full refugee recognition but who nonetheless face genuine danger in their home country. The moratorium on new applications has been extended twice and is now officially in place until July 2, 2026. To illustrate the scale of the problem, in the first 3 months of this year, only 25 family members were admitted by way of exception. In the same period last year, the figure was 401. In other words, it is currently 16 times harder to enter Austria through legal family channels than it was before. In response to this restrictive policy, 4 major organizations defending migrants' rights filed a complaint with the European Commission on 1 May. Asylkoordination Österreich, Diakonie, the International Refugee Assistance Project, and the Polish organization Stowarzyszenie Interwencji Prawnej, Association for Legal Intervention. They are calling for Austria to be subjected to an Vertragsverletzungsverfahren, an infringement procedure under EU law in which Brussels investigates whether Austria is breaching common European legislation by separating families. The complaint will be assessed by the EU Commissioner for Migration, Magnus Brunner, notably the former Austrian finance minister, who must now evaluate the conduct of his former colleagues. Austria's Interior Ministry has signaled no intention of lifting the restrictions. On the contrary, Austrian authorities maintain that the incoming EU Migration Pact will change the rules across all member states. The government plans to introduce a quota system from mid-2026, a fixed annual ceiling on the number of people permitted to join family members in Austria. That number will be determined by a so-called integration barometer, a composite indicator measuring whether Austrian schools have sufficient capacity for migrant children, whether hospitals have enough doctors, and whether adequate housing is available. Interior Minister Gerhard Karner has already warned that initial quotas could be very low. Amnesty International Austria cautions that such a quota system could result in people waiting 3 years or more to be reunited with their families. What does all this mean for you in practice, if you hold refugee status or subsidiary protection? At present, there is simply no official legal route to bring your family to Austria. You will need to wait until July 2026, when the government announces the new rules and quotas. In the meantime, we strongly advise seeking legal advice now. Diakonie and Caritas both offer legal assistance in Austria, and Asylkoordination Österreich tracks developments on a daily basis. If you have already submitted an application and are waiting for a response, it is vital that you keep every document. Retain every receipt, every official notification, and every piece of correspondence. These will serve as your primary evidence when the system reopens or when a lawyer takes up your case. And a word of caution, do not attempt to resolve the situation through unofficial intermediaries. The moratorium applies equally to everyone, and only a court ruling or a new government decision can change that.
The next topic concerns everyone who uses personal transport. On 1st May, Austria's updated Road Traffic Act, Straßenverkehrsordnung, its 36th edition, entered into force. The changes most significantly affect owners of electric scooters, e-scooters, and electric bicycles, e-bike. Helmet rules have been tightened. Riders of electric scooters under the age of 16 are now required to wear a helmet, and for electric bicycle riders, the threshold is 14 years. Fines for non-compliance are issued not to the child, but to the parents. The drink driving limit for electric scooter users has also been lowered, from 0.8 to 0.5 per mille. Your vehicle must also now meet new technical standards. Every electric scooter is required to be fitted with a bell and with directional turn signals, Fahrtrichtungsanzeiger, mounted at the ends of the handlebars. If your scooter is an older model without such signals, it is no longer permitted on public roads. A strict prohibition on carrying passengers also applies. Only the rider may be on the scooter, with no cargo held in the hands or hung from the handlebars. A particular note for courier workers: if you use a powerful electric scooter without pedals, be aware that from 1st October 2026, these vehicles will be officially reclassified as electric mopeds, e-mopeds. This means you will need a driving license of Category A or AM, official vehicle registration with a number plate, Kennzeichen, and mandatory insurance. It is advisable to begin processing the necessary documents now through the motoring club's OEAMTC or ARBU before demand peaks. And there is a positive development for car owners. Austria has finally introduced limits on so-called property disturbance claims, Besitzstörungsklagen, civil lawsuits filed for trespass on private property, for example, accidentally parking on someone else's land. Law firms had previously exploited this mechanism as a revenue stream, demanding large sums from drivers. Legal fees in such cases are now capped by law, meaning the amounts claimed will be considerably smaller.
Finally, from 1st May, Austria has introduced a new framework for monitoring attendance at language and integration courses. The Austrian Integration Fund, Österreichischer Integrationsfonds, ÖIF, has launched a unified digital database, an integration monitoring system. Attendance tracking was previously less rigorous, but the state will now see every absence in real time. If you are receiving social assistance and are enrolled in German language courses or specific integration modules, unexcused absences will trigger an automatic reduction in your payments. Also worth noting, the civic orientation and values courses, Werte- und Orientierungskurse, have officially been extended from 1st May. The expanded program is designed to give migrants a more thorough grounding in Austrian law, your rights, and your obligations toward the state. Completing these courses is a mandatory part of the integration process. Without them, you will not be able to obtain a permanent residence permit, Niederlassungsbewilligung, in future, nor qualify for certain forms of social support. We therefore strongly advise against ignoring invitations from the ÖIF and urge you to keep a close eye on your course schedule. And now, what has been happening in the capital?
From the end of April, a major phase of renovation has begun on the U4 metro line in Vienna. Track works have restricted services between Schwedenplatz and Landstraße stations. Wiener Linien is advising passengers to use alternative routes. On 1st May, Vienna's public outdoor swimming pools, Sommerbäder, officially opened for the season. Ticket prices have risen slightly this year, though significant concessions remain in place for children and young people. If you plan to visit regularly, a seasonal pass offers the best value. Some locations have introduced electronic queuing systems to reduce crowding at the entrance. Police and rescue services are reminding visitors to observe strict water safety rules, particularly parents with young children. The city's Municipal Waste Management Service, MA48, has launched a program to replace old waste containers with new smart bins equipped with fill level sensors, with a focus on residential districts. City authorities are urging residents to be more rigorous about waste sorting, particularly plastics and organic waste, as incorrect sorting can result in fines being issued to an entire building. The new measures are designed to reduce fuel consumption by municipal vehicles and improve environmental outcomes. New high-precision laser speed cameras have been installed on major roads around Vienna, including the A23 motorway. The devices are more accurate and capable of recording violations in both directions of travel. Their locations also change frequently. For drivers, the practical implication is clear. The margin of error is now smaller, meaning even 10 kilometers per hour above the limit is more likely to result in a fine. Speed enforcement is particularly active in construction zones and areas with temporary speed restrictions. Obey posted limits, even if you previously drove faster without consequence. Pay close attention to temporary signage. These are the spots where fines are issued most frequently. And do not count on older-style radar technology. The system has become considerably more precise. There is also an important health warning from physicians. Unusually warm weather at the end of April has triggered an early and intensive flowering season for grasses and trees in Vienna, resulting in a record number of consultations with doctors. City health services report that pollen concentrations in the air are currently at critical levels for allergy sufferers. Pharmacies are reporting unusually high demand for antihistamines, which are available without prescription. Specialists advise keeping windows closed at night and carrying out wet cleaning more frequently at home. If symptoms become severe, consult your family doctor.
And a reminder, Austria's biggest musical event of the year is approaching, one that will transform the capital into a vast, open-air stage. We are, of course, talking about the Eurovision Song Contest. From 1st of May, the Wiener Stadthalle, the venue hosting the 3 main live shows, has entered a heightened security zone. Visitors are advised to arrive well in advance to allow time for security screening queues. Please note that all tickets are personalized and will be checked against a passport or other official identity document. The contest runs from 11th to 16th of May. The fan zone, Eurovision Village, opens on Rathausplatz, the square in front of the City Hall, from 10th of May. Entry is free, and all 3 live shows will be screened on large outdoor displays. For those who live or work in the city center, significant traffic disruptions are expected in and around the Stadthalle, Rathausplatz, and the broader center. Wiener Linien will publish updated information daily. Tens of thousands of tourists from across Europe are expected to descend on the capital, meaning queues at restaurants, cafes, and museums, as well as elevated hotel prices. If you have routine matters to attend to, such as document processing, a medical appointment, or a move, it is advisable to schedule them either before or after Eurovision week. That concludes our Vienna news. We now turn to events in the federal states.
We begin in Upper Austria, where local authorities are working to stabilize the labor market. Following the announcement of financial difficulties and partial insolvency by motorcycle manufacturer KTM, the Public Employment Service, Arbeitsmarktservice, AMS, has established a dedicated support fund. Its purpose is to help hundreds of workers who have lost their jobs to find new employment quickly or to retrain for a different profession. If you worked in the automotive sector or a related industry and have been made redundant, contact the regional AMS office in Upper Austria to find out whether you are eligible for these support programs. In Carinthia, emergency services have concluded operations to bring a major forest fire in the Lesachtal area under control. The blaze destroyed more than 100 hectares of woodland. The situation was serious enough to require military helicopters to be deployed, and the main regional road, Geiltalstrasse, was closed due to the risk of falling scorched trees. Forest fires are not uncommon, but this year has been one of the driest in decades, keeping emergency services on heightened alert. Drought conditions have been so severe that some villages lost access to drinking water, which had to be delivered by tanker trucks. In Tyrol, the ski season has officially come to a close, ushering in the so-called low season, Nebensaison. For travelers, this is good news. Hotel prices in the Alps are falling by almost half. If you want to experience the mountains, May is the cheapest month to go. The tourism season is also getting underway in other regions. Eisenstadt, the capital of Burgenland, is expecting a significant influx of visitors this May for musical events honoring composer Joseph Haydn. Meanwhile, Vorarlberg is actively preparing for the 80th anniversary of the Bregenzer Festspiele. If you are planning to travel to these regions or are looking for seasonal work in hotels or restaurants, now is the ideal time to submit applications. Hospitality businesses are actively hiring for summer. That wraps up the regional news. Next, the most enjoyable segment, arts and culture.
Of course, the dominant cultural story, not just this week but throughout the whole of May, is the Eurovision Song Contest. This year's Jubilee 75th edition features 35 competing countries. Austria will be represented by 19-year-old artist Cosmo, performing his song Tanzschein. The hosts will be Victoria Swarovski, the well-known heiress to the Swarovski crystal dynasty, and actor Michael Ostrowski, both prominent figures in Austrian television. The Wiener Stadthalle stage will feature a large LED screen in the shape of a leaf. Eurovision Village at Rathausplatz will be open daily from 10th to 17th of May. The city's tourism board forecasts that Eurovision Week will deliver one of the year's most significant economic boosts, generating substantial revenue for hotels, restaurants, and tour operators. As for tickets, they officially sold out back in January. The only legitimate way to purchase one now is through the official resale platform Fansale, operated by ticketing provider OE-Ticket, where holders who can no longer attend may resell their places. Do not buy tickets from Facebook listings or sites such as Willhaben. All tickets are digital, linked to the holder's name in the smartphone app. If the name in the app does not match your passport, you will simply not be admitted. Many people may not realize that Eurovision is far more than just the two semifinals and the grand final. Tickets are available for 9 different shows. Jury shows, for example, are the full dress rehearsals held on the evenings before the live broadcasts. These are the performances on which the jury bases its votes. The atmosphere is identical to that of the final, but tickets are easier to find and less expensive. Family shows are daytime rehearsals on broadcast days, the ideal option for those attending with children. The volume is lower, there is no late-night rush, and prices are at their lowest. If you are lucky enough to find a ticket, keep the empty hands rule in mind. Bags larger than A4 format are not permitted inside the Wiener Stadthalle. Food, professional cameras, and any imagery other than the flags of participating countries are also prohibited. Arrive at least 2 hours before the start, as security queues will be substantial. If a ticket remains out of reach, head to Rathausplatz, where all shows will be broadcast free of charge on large outdoor screens.
Finally, a quick guide to what Vienna has to offer this coming week. For lovers of classical music in unconventional settings, the Kammerfunk project performs on 9th and 10th May. Chamber music played in non-traditional venues, including pub bars. This is quintessentially Viennese. High art meets casual surroundings. There will be a further performance on the 13th of May, conveniently scheduled between Eurovision rehearsals. From the 13th of May, a major project marking the 75th anniversary of the Wiener Festwochen Festival launches, a special digital trail through the city. In the meantime, the courtyards of the Museumsquartier, MQ, are already alive with open-air parties featuring DJs and art installations. This is one of Vienna's most popular gathering spots, attracting young people from across the world. And to close out the week, from Friday the 8th of May to Sunday the 10th of May, the celebrated Genuss Festival comes to the Stadtpark. This is Austria's largest culinary event, and best of all, entry to the festival grounds is completely free. More than 100 of the country's finest farms and small producers will gather in one place to showcase the very best of Austrian food. This year's flavor palette is genuinely impressive, from classic Styrian pumpkin seed oil to exotic Viennese snails and even alpine caviar. Alongside traditional cheeses and cured meats, visitors can sample unusual delicacies such as peanuts from the Weinviertel region and regional sushi. This is more than just an opportunity to enjoy a fine outdoor lunch. It is a wonderful chance to discover Austrian products that rarely make it onto the shelves of ordinary supermarkets. The festival runs from morning until evening, but we recommend arriving early, as large crowds are expected in the park at the weekend. It will make a perfect way to round off the week before the Austrian capital immerses itself fully in the spirit of Eurovision.
That brings this week's edition of Rot-Weiß-Rot Report to a close. Thank you for joining us. Find us on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and Spotify. We will continue to keep you informed about the most important developments in Austria: political, economic, social, and cultural. Stay safe, take care of your loved ones, and we'll be back next week.